Hey guys, welcome back. So with continuing our coverage on Immortal Thor, we find Thor facing his next test, which brings him toe-to-toe with Zeus. So in this video, we gotta talk about what led up to this, because we're dealing with some more new history that's tied into this story, which now makes Zeus the prototype for what Thor will become. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so coming back, we pick up with Thor, who's returned to Earth and made his way to Greece. And just as a really quick recap, this is taking place after what we saw recently where Thor had to restore the missing portion of Tyr's soul, back when that missing portion was being occupied by Oblivion. But even before that, prior to Thor leaving Earth, Dario Agger utilized his newly acquired ownership of the Thor IP to get the Enchantress to use it in a spell that would allow him to control Thor's story. And I have a link below for anyone who needs to check out the full playlist to get caught up on the extra details. But as a result of this spell that involved numerous people around the world reading Thor's new story, which was delivered by way of a comic book, this spell that was changing the truth, if you will, it caused Thor to be in utter confusion as long as he was on Earth. And that's still a thing here, so we'll talk more about that. But towards the latter end of this scheme, the Enchantress betrayed Dario Agger, causing Thor to be falsely accused for his death, and rightfully accused for the death of Roxxon Thor, which is one of the reasons why he's not really trying to spend time in the US, with him being wanted for a double homicide. And it's not even one of those things where it's like he's worried about being arrested or having a high-speed chase on his hammer or anything like that. But instead it's more like he'd rather not deal with the headache, and that's why we see him here being very low-key, in a shirt that says low-key, with his story continuing to be narrated by Loki. Now that's some Asgardian bars for you. But even more specifically, Thor finds himself in Greece because Hercules called him over for a favor. Because when Thor fought Thanos, Hercules saw the footage on the news, which at first had me thinking like, man, what news cameraman was filming on the moon? But Hercules mentioned it was when Thor was fighting Thanos in New York. So I was like, oh okay. Because for a second there I thought it was the same cameraman from DC that be keeping up with Barry Allen. But nonetheless, when Hercules heard Thanos say, "the wheel is turned," this reminded him about recently when he heard his father Zeus say the same thing, with Zeus being reborn from death as a force for evil, and declaring that a dark age is now upon them. But before they go too deep into this, for a moment here they catch up, and they admit on both ends how with everything that's been going on that they really haven't been there for each other, because both of them have lost their fathers recently. But on both ends, they understand that it's been kinda crazy lately, so they more or less give each other a pass. But while they're on the topic of the wheel turning, this has Hercules asking, well, who turned it? And the first person who comes to mind for him is Nyx. So he asks Thor, what does he know of her? And Thor's familiar with her as the goddess of the night, and for the people of Asgard, they know of her as well. But for the most part, Nyx is associated with the Greek pantheon. She was often at odds with Zeus, because between the two of them it was like a darkness versus light kind of thing. But at first she was invited to live among the Olympians, until she was exiled after warring with Zeus so much. So later on when night covered the whole earth, this gave her the power she needed to return and get her revenge, which resulted in Zeus's death. And with hearing this, it has Thor like, well, the Avengers, we locked her away, using the very forces of creation, which is referring to Avengers No Road Home. But Hercules cuts him off there, and he's like, how many times has night fallen on the whole world since then? Which, as we know, since No Road Home in 2019, the entire world was blacked out during King in Black, and once again more recently during Blood Hunt. So as a result of two major worldwide blackouts, they can only assume that she's obtained an insane amount of power. So off of that alone, Thor's like, hey, we're gonna need help. And as soon as he says that, Loki pops up, out of nowhere, almost like the one in this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends, because in their current event, the Asgard Divide, everyone can get the legendary champion, Loki the Deceiver, for free, just by logging in. And you can get another 3 Norse mythology themed champions through the in-game activities, which we'll talk more about in a little bit so you don't miss out. But if you're like me and you don't really care too much for playing games on your phone, Raid is also available on PC. It's free to play, and more importantly, it's on Steam, which is something that I wish more mobile games would do. And I mean, I would call out some names, but I ain't trying to fumble the bag. But nonetheless, having this game available on Steam, so I can play it on my Steam Deck or PC, it's made a world of a change as far as how often I play, because I just want my cell phone to be a cell phone. And to make it even better, it supports native ultra-wide 21:9, so if you're having an arena battle or just speccing your brand new characters, you now have more immersive options. So to unlock Loki the Deceiver for free, all you have to do is log in for 7 days between now and October 23rd. And if you do more than 7 days, you can earn additional rewards and access a second phase once the 14 days of login bonuses have been earned. And in addition to Loki, players can get 3 other Norse mythology themed champions by way of in-game activities, so you can later unlock Thor, Freya, and Odin. And in addition to this, if you scan my QR code or use my link below, new users will be rewarded with epic champion Tagoar, as well as 300k silver, 1 energy refill, 10 magic brews, and the 1-day XP boost. And for players who reach level 25, you'll be rewarded with epic champion Aina, as well as 1 energy refill, a 1-day XP boost, 200k silver, and an epic skill tome. So if you want to make sure to get all of this free content before the opportunity goes away, use my QR code or the link below. And once you're in, join my clan, Spillmongers, and I'll see you in game. Thanks again to Raid for sponsoring this video. But when Loki pops up here, it's one of those things where he's been here the whole time. So he's more or less just like, I'm in. So Hercules tells Loki, like, hey, since you're the expert on magic and tales, if we wish to question a returned Queen of Night, where might we find her? And Loki's response here is just like, well, why wouldn't she find you? The Avengers killed her kids, didn't they? She's gonna want revenge. And as it stands, she's had 2 endless nights since their last encounter, but there's still a chance that she could need natural night to restore her power. So right here, Loki's like, where can the longest night be found? In midsummer. Which from here leads them to the Antarctic, because it's down here where night lasts the longest, where in some cases there's no sunrise for months. And when they get here, there's a moment where Thor asks Loki if he'd be able to help him out by removing the Enchantress spell, since he's the Skald of Realms, and even Enchantress admitted that she's nowhere near Loki with story magic. But Loki tells Thor that he can't just undo this, and it's mainly because the Enchantress tied Thor's story to a comic book, which was available for print and digital, which is mighty generous for a villain in this day and age. But because the story is being read by millions of people, this has enhanced the spell to a crazy level of complexity, where Loki would need all of them to stop reading it in order to have a chance at forging a new tale. So for the time being at least, Loki tells Thor it's a no-go. But in the meantime, we also know there's a loophole in all of this, because even though this spell causes Thor to be dim-witted while he's on Earth, it doesn't have as much of an effect on him when he's physically near the people who know him well. So as it stands, with him having both Loki and Hercules nearby, for the time being, Thor's able to function as if he's just fine. But in the background, there's still the question of what the Enchantress and Scourge want, since as it would seem they're working together and against Thor. So Thor just figures it's likely they're after the same thing, though in the case of Scourge, there's likely more to it, much like we talked about before. But in the here and now, with Thor having Loki and Hercules at his side, he's good. But out of nowhere while they're here, Nyx shows up. And right away Hercules is like, she's not recovering. She's recovered all her power and more. So it begs the question of, if she already has her power restored and some, why hasn't she sought out vengeance? And we get this answer quick, because Hercules is like, oh no, what would the Mother of Night want more than revenge? Thor? As a voice comes from behind them saying, what does any mother want? The best for her brood. And as soon as they turn around, they see the 2nd and 3rd children of Nyx, Apate and Dolos, with a knife to Loki's throat saying make a move and this one dies. And much like the other gods, their names have meanings, with Apate's blade resembling the rage of ignorance, and her brother's powders create illusion, which is what caused their end when the Night Queen was tricked into killing them. But now that her powers restored, she was able to bring them back. And she even goes on to confirm what they suspected, because she tells them, an endless night called me back from the dust and ash, son of Zeus, to avenge myself on the Avengers. A 2nd endless night restored my power, and with it I journeyed here. You were correct when you spoke my name. I needed natural dark. I needed this cold womb to bring life to the children I lost. Which again just goes back to what they thought earlier, because King in Black brought her back, and Bloodhunt restored her power, and some. And that's why she came here to restore her children. So next she opens her hand and releases Oasis, which I think that's how you say it. But this is her youngest daughter, the goddess of grief and despair. But because she's already tasted the grief of Hercules before, this time she goes for Thor, and she just goes on to torment him about mistakes he's made, traps he's fallen into, his brother Hermod who recently died, the shattered Rainbow Bridge, the list goes on. And as Hercules is trying to tell Thor to hang in there, out from under the snow comes Hypnos, the firstborn of Nyx, who is the god of sleep. So it makes for this moment where both of them are in trouble. And it's almost like one of those times where both you and your teammate are fighting for your lives, so one of you's gotta pop your ultimate. Well, in this situation, that person's Thor. And I mean, it's really more of a special move than an ultimate, cause it's not like he went full-blown Thor force here. But it creates the opportunity for Thor to get free and beat the other enemy with his enemy. But as soon as Thor handles this, Apate sees this and she cuts Loki's throat. And right away, Thor's like, you shouldn't have done that. Cause come to find out, Loki tricked them, causing Apate to cut the throat of her brother Dolos instead. And this leads to Loki showing himself in his true Skald form, which at first has Hercules celebrating like, hey, that's what I'm talking about, that's my trickster. But at the same time, Thor realizes that not only is this Loki's most powerful aspect, but this is also the aspect of Loki that is arriving as Thor's enemy, which just goes back to what Loki asked Thor before, when he asked him if he trusted him as a brother, as an enemy, because all of these forms work in Thor's favor. So even now when Loki appears in this form, and he sends them all into a dimension without suns or sunlight, this is him giving Thor his next test. And throughout this series, just like we've seen, every time Thor is tested, when he passes that test, he just comes out more powerful. And as soon as they arrive in this dark dimension, it initially appears like Thor and Hercules are alone, only for them soon after to be met by the arrival of Zeus. But before this continues, we go back to the far past for a moment here, where we find a conversation between Gia and Rhea, and it gives us a new spin on the history, because it's around this time where Gia was just made aware of the fact that Cronus is eating his children, and at the time he was doing this because it was prophesied that one of his children would kill him and take his throne. And this was a huge offense to Gia, because long before this she established that everything must change, and that all things must live and grow, or wither and die. And Cronus didn't want to change, so it was in her best interest to save this child Zeus. So to do this, she put a measure of life into a stone and gave it to Rhea, so that Cronus could consume it and be convinced that it was his child. So in exchange, Gia took the young Zeus, who she saw as a child that had the potential to be the great champion this world would need one day, one who would fight for the living earth and the lives she made upon it. But at the time, though she realized the young Zeus had the potential, she eventually settled with it being only that. And it was mainly based on the idea of the child having the limitation of being his father's son, because she saw that as something that would keep him from gaining the wisdom that was necessary. So at the time, she was like Zeus would be a prototype, a pattern, as a final test for the one to come perhaps. Which is mainly referring to what we saw in Immortal Thor issue 8, when she told Thor about the mercy of her judgment and how she gave the world hope by giving it him. So now when we see her marking Zeus as a child, as she holds out the Utgard key, this is her preparing Zeus to contribute to the champion that is yet to come. Because she even says to him here, you are a Skyfather from his Skyfather's line, and thus the lightning is your birthright, held by your hand. But Tornos was more than the storm, and more will be needed. So in his name and mine, I mark you, son of Cronus. I mark you with his shadow. I mark you for all time. I mark you with the will of fate. And as the will turned, change happened, which is why the young Zeus grew up to overthrow Cronus, as the prophecy said he would. So fast forward to the present day, the wheels turned again and it's brought Zeus to exile, in the same dimension without sun or light that Thor was sent to by Loki. And as soon as they get here, Zeus is very confrontational. But even that plays into his new history and the mark that was placed upon him heading up to now, because when it comes down to it, the same reason Zeus wasn't chosen to be the champion, which had a lot to do with him being his father's son, this also plays into what Gia already knew, as far as Zeus becoming a test for the actual champion when the wheel turned. But when Zeus tries to attack Thor with lightning, Thor just tells it to turn, and it does. And right here Thor says, my thanks, little lightning. I had no quarrel with thee, only with thy so-called master, for that is the business I have with thee, Zeus of the philosophers, the business of storm gods, the business of sky fathers. And with Thor saying this right here, he knows Zeus is a big part of his test, and that's what he's referring to in this moment. But right here Nyx steps in saying, and only sky fathers, Thor? For the sky mother would speak with you all. So of course when she shows up, Zeus loses it, because Nyx is the one who killed him. And she doesn't shy away from it, because she goes on to say, and would that my snapping of your fat neck had taken. But it seems this reborn Zeus is as proud and arrogant as the Zeus that came before. So Thor tells her, and that is why we sought you out, Mother of Night. Was his return your doing? What do you know of the will that turned in him? So Nyx tells Thor, what could I know of such? I am not thy mother. who is the changing of season. I am not the rising of the sun, nor am I its setting. I am simply the cold calm of the midnight, the stillness of the breeze, the chirp of the crickets, and the moon that hangs overhead, which is really just her telling Thor that she's not Gia, because it's Thor's mother who brings about change in seasons. But then it's right here where she pulls down the moon to slam it on Thor's head, where Thor quickly uses the dimensional winds to relocate himself and Hercules to another area in this dimension so Thor can have some time to think. But on the other hand with Zeus, he just stays here, and he lets this moon slam on him cause he ain't no punk. And even Hercules expresses that he doesn't necessarily like running from a fight. But again, Thor's not running here because he knows Loki brought him to this dimension as a part of a test. And Thor needs to pass that test before he goes anywhere, because Loki's rune spell is still holding them in this sunless realm. But soon after they move to this area, Loki shows up with Athena, where in her case, the wheel of fate has also turned too. So instead of her just being the goddess of wisdom, she now has the wisdom beyond wisdom. And when they get here, Thor realizes that the rune spell Loki's using to keep him here, it's also a hint to the answer to this test or riddle that Thor must solve, since the rune resembles endurance, tenacity, courage against the odds, with it also being a rune of Thor's name. So now with him figuring out the part about Zeus, as well as the endurance and tenacity, as well as having courage against the odds, now Thor's just got to figure out how to apply all of this to solve Loki's riddle. So for a moment Hercules is just like, why couldn't he learn it at home? And Athena responds saying, because it's not his trial alone, brother, and some trials cannot be avoided. Which right there is just referring to the whole idea of Thor and Zeus being destined to cross paths in this place at this time, because the wheel must turn. One season must end and the other must begin. And it has a little bit to do with Hercules too, and we'll get to that because there's a reason why he's here. But in the middle of this conversation, Zeus shows back up holding hands with Nyx, and the two of them are more or less like, hey, we go together now. But no, really, when they get here, Zeus lets them know that he's reached an agreement with Nyx, where together they're going to create a new race of deathless gods so they can conquer all that is. And it's important what Hercules says here because his response is like so changed, yet so much the same. Because even though Zeus comes off as very different at this point, even with his new goal and objective, going forward, he wants to keep things in a perpetual state, which completely goes against the will of fate. But at the same time, this dark ambition as it would seem to be, this is the same thing that's been in him and been with him since he's his father's son. But with Zeus and Nyx trapped in this dimension, Nyx could go after Loki, get herself out, and then get Zeus out, but instead she tells Zeus to prove his worth, which is what then leads to Zeus attacking Loki, only to have Thor redirect the lightning just like he did before. And Thor goes on to explain that even when Loki is his enemy, he's still his kin. And at this point in time, Loki is Thor's puzzle/problem to solve. So as you would expect, Zeus then goes after Thor. And it's funny how Nyx is just over on the side telling her man like, hey, should I help? Because as you might imagine, this is a bit embarrassing for Zeus, because Thor's just telling each and every lightning bolt what to do, while Zeus is over here putting in work. But through the course of this, Hercules, he pretty much solves the riddle. Because throughout this, time and time again it's been said, some fates cannot be avoided. So at this point, Hercules like, no, that's it. Do as he says, Thor. That's the answer. To take it like a god. And as soon as Thor heard that, he knew what he needed to do. Because this is the part of his test where he needs to endure. So Thor flies up to Zeus so he can put them hands on him. Because after all, Zeus had been saying his worshippers were better than Thor's, with Thor's people being barbarians, raiders, and savages, while Zeus's worshippers were philosophers. So right here, Thor is like, I understand they were great wrestlers too, so let me see if you can demonstrate. But with Thor now being this close to Zeus, Zeus tells him it only seals your doom. You could turn the lightning when I hurled it from afar, peasant god, but how will you deflect it now? When I summon it inside you, which from the outside looking in, it looks like it's a wrap for Thor. So as soon as this happens, Nyx tells Hercules she's about to take care of him. But he's just like, hold on, wait. Thor endures. He's not quite done yet. And to take this another step further, we're also shown one of the reasons why Hercules needed to be here. Because he needed to witness this and to learn from it. Which I imagine has something to do with him being his father's son and not repeating the mistakes of his forefathers, and instead taking a similar route to what we've seen Thor do up to this point, which is grow in wisdom. So for a moment here while Thor is still enduring, Hercules tells Nyx that he forgives her, and initially she takes it as a sign of disrespect. So Hercules is more or less like, what are you gonna do, kill me? Because it really doesn't matter who kills who here, we're all gonna come back. But then he more or less tells her to open her eyes because she talks about being trapped here. in this realm with no sun and no daylight. But the truth is, this place is perfect for her. And he tells her, isn't this what you've always been looking for? Is this not your true place of power? And it's really an eye-opener for Nyx, because now she realizes she could build something here even greater than the Olympians. So for this reason, she deletes her kids, Apate and Oasis, because she sees no need for wrath or deceit. And it's not permanent, because if she sees need for them in the future, in the universes that she'll create, then she'll just bring them back. And in the case of Hypnos, she tells him to travel back with Hercules to the old world so he can be her eyes and ears. But back over with Thor, who's been enduring this whole time. It's here where he tells Zeus what he meant by them sharing the business of Skyfathers, which more specifically pertains to Thor having the all-power. So it's Zeus giving him everything that he's got, Thor's taking everything that he's got. Hey, yo, as he drains Zeus completely. But it's one of those things like Hercules said, eventually Zeus, he'll be back. And it's here where Thor says, "'Tis done." The power of Zeus and the power of Odin in one god. But when he speaks, Hercules notices something new in Thor's voice, an echo of darkness. But Thor just tells him, "You have nothing to fear, Hercules. You surely will understand. I see it so clearly." So Hercules is just like, "See what?" as he looks at Thor's face, which is marked with the will of fate. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/Dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.